flip to the next slide. So this is just basically the setup of the actual method. And besides learning an amazing amount about climate change, there was a bit that I knew going in and more coming out now, just not understanding at all how big this issue is. And it's one of those where you pull a thread in one part of the sweater and it unravels in 3 other places and you think, man, I don't even know. I mean, you separate mitigation and adaptation and all of a sudden everything you come up with for one of them applies to the other. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was quite overwhelming, but this process of actually our understandings becoming central to the recommendations was one of the most amazing ways of recognizing the knowledge that individuals can actually bring to something and to learn from each other. If you want to flick over. So I've got a website at the end that you can have a look at the whole document and all the recommendations, but these are within the theme, some of the things that really came out. We've talked a little bit about the training scheme already today, and in that first recommendation, one of the things that the group was really interested in was this idea of trying to make climate change and the carbon trading scheme and anything that we respond not a political football. And with this, the way that it's coming out at the moment, this idea that it could fail is a really dangerous idea of thinking of how we're going to respond to climate change in any policy that we implement. Because if something goes wrong, how can we build something into the system that we can just reflexively learn from what went wrong and then change it and keep going forward, as opposed to saying, no, that didn't work, it's time for a new government, that was a really bad decision. So that was one of the main recommendations that we were hoping someone else would have an answer to, because we obviously didn't in 3 weekends. We were also really strongly in support of the trading scheme, and this was another take-home lesson from this whole process, was how do individuals, in terms of this international responsibility that we give to our government, we need to continually support them and show them why we actually want this and how do we want this, and how do they hear forums like this and us talking about this issue. And that was a really great part of this process, because we actually got to present our recommendations to Penny Wong, but it was a question that came up, and how do we, as a community, have our voices actually heard, and our worries and our understandings and our learning. A couple of the just ones on the bottom, I don't know if you can see that last one. We were very, very adamant about, similar to the food miles in the UK, having transparent labeling systems to protect consumers. Because there are going to be aspects of the carbon trading scheme that if we start taxing or trading carbon on transport, a lot of food that we get in a very unsustainable manner is going to realistically be put up in price. And with transparent labeling, our hope was that this way local food would actually go down as opposed to up, and then it wouldn't just be a straight price increase across the boards, and consumer choice would be a bit more transparent. I'm going to flip to the next one. Adaptation. Now, I do apologize, I don't like wordy slides generally, but this was a big one throughout the whole set, all 3 sessions. We heard from a lot of amazing project representatives who have done work in the South Pacific and in the Asia Pacific, and they mainly all had the same message that you've got to be locally based, you've got to include women, you've got to include young people, you've got to be respective of whatever's happening in the local ground. And the main thing that we came up with was that Australia has to have a policy that is not a one-size-fits-all. So it has to be open and moldable and transferable to every local situation that any kind of adaptation might fit into. The interesting bit was when we did present this, the government was pretty adamant that they do this already. And it became clear to us that there's a bit of a language barrier when we use these terms of being local and including local communities. And it's a big challenge to people who are working on the ground to figure out what that actually means and not just tick the box and say we've done this. We were really strong with the idea that there are some significant topics that should be at the forefront of research in water security, food security, health, biodiversity, conservation issues, and making sure that all of these, that none of these are left off when it comes to implementing anything. A lot of whole systems analysis came up quite a bit in terms of we can't propose to fix something knowing that down the road, a year or two, the actual solution is going to create a further problem. So long-term planning based on sustainability. And now these two bottom ones down here, we really felt as a panel that Australia's primary role should be absolutely giving every local community that they're working in the accountability and ownership of the adaptation programs that we bring. This can't be aid, and Cam said it wonderfully before, that we can't just replace the aid that we're giving and call it climate change adaptation. This has to be something really, really different. And one of the things that was really interesting, we heard from a guy from Tuvalu, and he came and presented what was his honors project, and he'd gotten a grant from the government to come here to do honors, and he did it on architecture. And he did a history of the entire architectural development from his particular island in Tuvalu across the last, I think it was 500 years. And it was just brilliant to see all the things, and everyone was kind of silently sitting there thinking, you know, this is really sad, his island's sinking, and he's talking about preserving his architecture. But then he presented this brilliant plan at the end about moving his entire nation onto an island in Australia, and how the different architectural types would be sustained in various aspects of different parts of the island with different communities linked by a transport network, and it was just out of this world what he did. But the thing that resonated was that he wasn't asking for help. He was simply asking for what anyone in this room could call a community grant or any kind of scheme that we would all be eligible to participate under. And it was really important when we realized that we can't think of this in terms of we have money, where are we going to throw it? It's got to be what are people actually doing, and what do they need, and what do they want, and how can we assist them to help themselves? And that last point, this has come up quite a bit, and Cam spoke of it already, that any kind of adaptation, any kind of program that we bring in, anything to eradicate poverty or help health, it has to make sense to the people that we're delivering it to. And one of the big things with climate change are these brilliant remote sensing models and these sea level adaptation programs, and it's all done on IT, and we email it, and it comes out to a South Pacific island that doesn't have the computer capacity to actually download the program to help them. And then you're giving it to a community of elders that have never even sat down in front of a computer before. So if we are going to use IT, we really need to start including youth, and we have to get the youth to almost translate what's happening into their community. And even better, we need to start using actual A4 pages with descriptive pictures and plans, and going in and getting people from the community to help us create these brilliant communication strategies that we may be coming up with. Now, population displacement was this one that we want mitigation to work, and we want adaptation to work, and population displacement may or may not occur based on the successes of those, but frankly it's happening already, and if you aren't aware of that, then there's only a matter of time before you will be. Recently, I think it was our third session, the president of Kiribati had come to Brisbane, and there was 40 young women who had come over from Kiribati on nursing visas. And they had come to study nursing, and they're just about to finish and graduate, and the president flew over and took them all in to a meeting and said, you're not coming back to the country, there's no opportunity left for you here, you're staying in Australia. And that was a huge wake-up call to the Australian program that accepted this, and to all of these 40 women who are now being asked to stay here and not come home for the future that they thought they'd come to actually become nurses for.